A women CEO hears a janitor man speak 13 languages, what he does next. Leaves the whole office shocked. He was emptying the trash bins near the break room when the CEO heard him speak Arabic. Not just speak, command it. With a calm, rich tone that rolled off his tongue like he'd been raised in Cairo. The words froze her mid-stride, coffee halfway to her lips. It wasn't the language itself that stopped her cold. It was who was speaking it. Most of the staff at Glenwood Innovations never really looked at the janitorial team, not in a cruel way, just how office rhythms go. People come in early, laser-focused, heads down, earbuds in. Cleaners come in late. Gloves on, barely noticed. It's like they're part of the furniture, always there, never seen. But this morning in downtown Denver, Olivia Grant, the newly appointed CEO and youngest ever to lead Glenwood, happened to take the side hallway instead of the glass corridor. She hated the spotlight that came with the executive floor and liked entering through the same doors as the interns. She believed in people. Or at least she thought she did. She was passing the third-floor kitchenette when she heard it. This soft, firm voice navigating a language she'd only heard during her undergraduate summer abroad in Morocco. She paused, turned her head. There, by the vending machine, was a tall man in a gray custodial shirt, bent slightly as he helped an elderly maintenance contractor reset a device in Arabic, his tone warm and patient. Olivia blinked. She didn't know his name. She'd seen him maybe twice in passing, a quiet guy, always sweeping near the staircase, always done before 7 a.m. Yet here he was, switching languages mid-sentence like it was nothing. When the older man left, the janitor stood, nodded once, and turned, just in time to catch a UPS guy fumbling through shipping paperwork. Label mix-up? The janitor asked in crisp German. The delivery man jolted in surprise, then laughed. Ja, genau. Danke, mein Freund. As he reached to sign the form, a new voice cut through. A software vendor at the welcome desk was on the phone, frustrated. She didn't understand the instructions being given in Italian. The janitor casually stepped over and said, Vuole. Che acceda con il codice ricevuto ieri sera. The vendor's eyes lit up with relief. Olivia took a slow breath. This wasn't some parlor trick. This was precision, fluidity, mastery. She stepped forward, careful not to interrupt too quickly. Excuse me, she said, her voice more question than command. The janitor turned, calm, respectful, curious. Yes, ma'am? That was Arabic, right? He nodded once. Yes, and German. A bit of Italian, too. She raised an eyebrow. How many languages do you speak? He didn't flinch. 13, he said simply. Fluently, no ego, no smirk, just a clean answer, like it was nothing more than his height or shoe size. Olivia stared at him, suddenly aware of how little she actually knew about the people who made this company run. Her board had spent $500,000 last quarter on translation software, and here stood a man, quiet, invisible, who could probably do twice the job with just his voice and a notepad. She took a step closer. What's your name? Victor, he said. Victor Jameson. She blinked slowly, like her brain needed a second to catch up with the information. Victor Jameson. A janitor. 13 languages. No resume on her desk. No LinkedIn recommendations. No fuss. Just a mop in one. Hand and the kind of raw living intelligence that executives pay consultants 6 figures to bring into boardrooms. 13, she repeated, mostly to herself. Victor gave a modest shrug. Some of them are rusty. I don't get to use Croatian or Tamil much these days. She laughed once, short, disbelieving. And yet you're working here? Cleaning? Floors? I like quiet work, he said simply. And I like to listen. Olivia's mind spun. Her company was expanding across Latin America. Negotiations with a Berlin-based startup had stalled over communication issues. Last month, a contract with a Tokyo partner nearly collapsed over poor translation. She had departments full of people, with MBAs who still relied on Google Translate to write emails. Yet here stood a man who navigated 9 world cultures before breakfast. and no one knew. A middle manager scurried past behind them, barely glancing at Victor. Olivia didn't miss it. She tilted her head. "Victor, would you mind stepping into my office for a moment?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, ma'am, just let me put my card away." "No rush," she said, but her mind was already sprinting ahead. 10 minutes later, he was sitting across from her in the 15th floor corner office, the skyline of Denver stretching behind them like a silent audience. He sat straight, not stiff. Calm, but not overly formal. Like he belonged there. Like the leather chair didn't intimidate him one bit. She leaned forward. "Can I ask how you learned all those languages?" Victor took a breath, his eyes moving, to the window for a second before returning to hers. "My father was in the military. We moved a lot. I picked up Hindi in New Delhi before I turned 10. French came later when we lived in Côte d'Ivoire. Mandarin from my neighbor in San Diego. And Arabic. Well, that one came from my grandma." She smiled. "You must have had quite the childhood." "I didn't always like it," he admitted. "But I always loved how people sounded when they spoke their truth, in their own tongue." That line hit her harder than she expected. For a second, neither of them said anything. Then Olivia opened her laptop and pulled up the company's live interpreter budget, $212,000, this year alone, and here sat Victor, fluent in more than half of their key territories. She narrowed her eyes, not with suspicion, but with intrigue. "Victor, what are you doing tonight?" He blinked. "Nothing planned." "How would you feel about joining tomorrow's call with our partners in Tokyo? Just listen in. Give your thoughts after." He smiled faintly. "Sure, if it helps." She leaned back slowly, a grin forming. "Oh, it will help." What she didn't know yet, what no one in that building could have guessed, was that this quiet man with a utility belt and no college degree was about to solve a problem her executive team hadn't cracked in 6 months, and within 48 hours he'd be sitting in the boardroom, not as a janitor, but as the company's secret weapon. But that moment, the one that truly changed everything, was still to come. Victor showed up the next morning in the same uniform, navy slacks, gray polo, name stitched over the chest. No suit, no tie, no laptop bag. Just a leather-bound notebook tucked under his arm and a pen clipped to the edge like it belonged to him more than any keyboard ever could. He stepped into the executive boardroom at 8:59 a.m. At 9:01, the screen blinked to life with the faces of the Tokyo partners, their expressions polite but tense. Olivia glanced across the room at her usual interpreter, absent thanks to a last-minute emergency. She looked to Victor. "You good?" He gave one quiet nod. The next 20 minutes were a blur of syllables, cultural nuance, and technical jargon. Victor sat still for most of it, listening intently, jotting something in that worn notebook. He only raised his hand once. Olivia gave a nod. He leaned forward, adjusted the mic, and spoke. Perfect Japanese. Not textbook, not stiff, not mechanical. He laughed when they laughed, paused when they paused. He shifted tone mid-sentence the way only someone who lived a language could. And on the other side of the screen? Silence. Then smiles. Then a ripple of laughter and nods from the Japanese execs. One of them, the lead negotiator, Mr. Takahashi, leaned closer to his camera and said, "Forgive me, but are you a new member of the executive team?" Victor smiled politely. "I'm the janitor." Laughter again, but this time it wasn't dismissive. It was stunned. Genuine. "I think we're going to have a very productive meeting today," Takahashi said, now visibly relaxed. And they did. Contracts that had stalled for months moved forward in 40 minutes. Misunderstandings were cleared up. Dates were locked in. Goals aligned. When the call ended, the room was silent. Victor closed his notebook, uncapped his pen, and wrote something with a small nod to himself. Then he stood up, ready to leave. But Olivia wasn't done. "Victor," she said, her voice calm but electric, "I want to offer you a new role." He turned to her, brows raised. "Officially," she said, "I want you on the global relations team. You'll advise on international deals, assist with language strategy, and attend high-level meetings. Full benefits, executive-level salary." The room shifted. No one had expected that, not even Victor. He hesitated. "Ma'am, I don't have a degree. You have something better," she said, rising to meet his gaze. "You have presence, insight, experience no diploma can give." His jaw tensed, not with pride but with disbelief. He nodded slowly. "Then I accept." Cheers broke out from the corner of the room. A couple of junior execs who'd never even said hi to Victor before suddenly clapped like they'd known him for years. But it wasn't just the job offer that changed everything. It was what happened next. Because as Victor turned to leave, one of the senior partners, the same man who used to step around Victor's mop bucket in the hallway without a second glance, stood up and said, "Wait, could you help me review a presentation we're sending to our Berlin office?" And another said, "Victor, would you mind sitting in on the Latin America planning call next week?" In 20 minutes, the janitor became the most requested man in the building, not because of his title, but because he was seen. Really seen, and for the first time, the people in that boardroom realized brilliance doesn't always walk in wearing a suit. Sometimes it pushes a cart and listens before it speaks. But Victor? Victor was about to speak to the whole world, and they were about to listen. Victor didn't return to the janitor's closet that afternoon. Instead, Olivia had her assistant escort him to the 19th floor, a floor he'd never set foot on, where the doors didn't squeak, and the air smelled like polished wood and lavender diffusers. Inside a corner office with a view of the skyline, a leather chair sat behind a desk already cleared for him. A laptop waited with his name already set up in the welcome screen. "Temporary space," Olivia said, standing in the doorway. "Your official office will be ready by next week." Victor stepped in slowly, like a man walking into someone else's dream. He touched the chair, the clean desk, then turned to the window where the city stretched for miles. The same streets he used to walk for bus routes and second jobs now looked smaller, like something he could actually navigate. A knock at the door. Olivia motioned for him to sit. "I've already informed HR," she said. "We're reclassifying your role. You'll receive full executive onboarding, a company car, and relocation options if needed. You'll have access to language training systems, global negotiation courses, though I doubt you'll need much of those." Victor finally sat, still silent. "I want to be honest with you," Olivia continued. "This wasn't a favor. It's not charity. You saved our biggest Tokyo deal. And more importantly," she paused, her gaze steady, "you reminded us that leadership doesn't always look the way we expect." He cleared his throat. "There are a lot of people like me in buildings like this." "I know," she said. "Let's start changing that." Just then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. Takahashi just sent a message. He wants to schedule another meeting, but this time in person, in Tokyo. Victor blinked. "You want me to go?" "I want you to lead." His breath caught. For a man who'd spent 10 years wiping the floors in silence, that sentence held more power than a million job offers. She stood, extended her hand. "So, what do you say, Victor?" He looked at her, at the skyline beyond, at the reflection of himself now sitting in a corner office, instead of pushing a cart down dark hallways. And he took her hand. "I say it's time the world heard from people like me." And in that moment, the offer became something bigger than a job. It was a seat at the table, finally. And Victor? He was already pulling out chairs for others. The news of Victor's promotion spread through the building like a brush fire. Some called it inspiring. Others whispered it was a publicity stunt. A few clapped him on the back in the break room with practiced smiles, while others watched in silence, their eyes sharp, calculating. It wasn't long before the emails started. Those just checking in messages from managers who had never once responded to his maintenance reports, but suddenly had questions about his experience. In the second week, Victor entered a strategy meeting to find Charles, VP of Operations, already seated at the head of the table. Charles didn't look up as Victor walked in, but his voice carried. "Oh, Victor. Glad you could join. We were just reviewing international expansion. You know, the work that typically requires credentials." The room tensed. Victor didn't flinch. "I figured firsthand fluency and field knowledge might count for something," Victor replied calmly, placing his notebook on the table. "Unless we're just listing degrees today." A few junior analysts chuckled quietly, but Charles didn't laugh. "That's not what I meant," he said, finally meeting Victor's eyes. "We're just moving fast. We need structure, not improvisation." Victor nodded slowly. "Good. Because structure is why I spent 10 years cleaning up after broken systems. Improvisation kept me sane in between." The room went quiet. The meeting began. But friction didn't end there. That Friday, Victor found his access badge denied at the executive elevator. No explanation. He walked to security, 3 flights up. "System error," they said. Third time that week, then came the audit. HR emailed him about his prior background, citing incomplete documentation from his janitorial hire date 10 years ago. The same documentation that had passed 3 internal reviews without question. Victor didn't yell, didn't storm into offices or demand apologies. He printed every form again, highlighted every line, walked it back to HR himself and said, "I've lived under scrutiny before. This won't scare me." Still, Olivia saw it happening. She'd warned him quietly after their first week. "Change makes people uncomfortable," she said, "especially when it comes from someone they used to ignore." He just smiled. "They can be uncomfortable. I've been uncomfortable my whole life." The final straw came during a stakeholder dinner at a high-end steakhouse. Victor showed up early, dressed sharp, notes memorized. But when he introduced himself to a regional VP from San Diego, the man blinked, clearly confused. "I thought you were the translator." Victor's smile didn't break. "No, sir. I'm leading the deal." Halfway through the dinner, Victor caught Charles making a comment under his breath to another exec. "From janitor to boardroom in a month," Charles scoffed. "Let's see how long that lasts." Victor stood. He raised his glass, not angrily, but with intent. "To the ones who think I shouldn't be here," he said loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Thank you. You remind me why I'm never going back." He took a slow sip. Olivia met his eyes across the table, pride flickering behind her calm expression. Charles said nothing after that, because even in resistance, Victor wasn't shrinking. He was rising, and the higher he climbed, the more obvious it became. The pushback wasn't about him. It was about what he represented, and that was power they couldn't control. It happened on a Monday morning. Gray skies, thick coffee, and a packed conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. Victor was leading the quarterly global strategy call, seated at the head of a long table, with regional managers from 5 continents on video tiles behind him. The mood was tense. They were on the verge of losing a multi-million-dollar logistics deal in São Paulo. Negotiations had stalled for weeks. Mistranslations, missed deadlines, cultural misunderstandings. It was crumbling. Victor had stayed quiet for most of the call, listening as Charles stumbled through another formal apology to the Brazilian team. "Let's remain optimistic," Charles said with a tight smile. "Our team has assured me that the Portuguese interpreters are—" Victor raised his hand gently. "We won't need the interpreters today." Heads turned. "Excuse me?" Charles asked, almost amused. Victor clicked a button on the console. The feed shifted. The Brazilian boardroom filled the screen. Their lead director, Ana, sat at the table, arms folded, expression guarded. Victor leaned in. and in flawless Portuguese, he began. Bom dia, Ana. Antes de mais nada, quero pedir desculpas pessoalmente. Good morning, Ana. First of all, I want to personally apologize. The room froze. On screen, Ana sat up straighter, eyes narrowing, then softening. Victor didn't stop. He switched from apology to proposal, rewriting the entire rollout plan, adjusting dates, removing redundancies, aligning goals with local vendors and customs. Every word was precise, native, alive, no delay, no filter. Halfway through, the Brazilian team was nodding. By the end, Ana smiled. A real smile. Finalmente alguém que entende, she said. Finally, someone who understands. The call ended with applause. Not forced, not polite. Real applause from every floor. Even Charles had to clap, his eyes lowered. Olivia caught Victor's gaze across the room, a proud, wordless nod between equals. But the real moment came minutes later. Victor returned to his new office. As he set down his notes, his phone buzzed, an internal memo from the CEO's office. Subject: Global Language and Inclusion Initiative. The email announced a new company-wide directive, cross-cultural fluency as a cornerstone of leadership, language scholarships for employees, a mentorship program for underrepresented talent, and leading. It all? Victor Ramirez, Senior Director of Global Communications. He stared at the screen. Senior. Director. Not interim. Not assistant. Director. He didn't cry. He didn't cheer. He exhaled. Long, deep, solid. He'd pushed against ceilings for years, some glass, some concrete. Today, one cracked open, not just for him, but for every invisible voice that had ever echoed down a hallway, unnoticed. Victor walked to the window, Chicago stretching wide beneath him, and whispered two quiet words. The next morning, the atmosphere in the building felt different, electric, almost palpable. Conversations that once skimmed over Victor now centered around him, but not with the usual skepticism. There was curiosity, respect, even admiration. Olivia's memo had landed hard. Across every department, the company was committing to a new era. Language fluency wouldn't just be a skill, it would be a marker of leadership potential. Inclusion wasn't a checkbox. It was a strategy. The janitorial staff, once invisible, now shared Victor's stories in break rooms and hallways. His promotion sparked questions, conversations, and a surprising wave of pride. I never thought someone like Victor could sit in that chair, whispered Hazel, a fellow custodian, as she passed by the executive elevators. But change wasn't just about recognition. It was about action. HR began rolling out workshops led by Victor himself, blending language lessons with stories of perseverance. Senior managers sat shoulder to shoulder with cleaning crews, learning phrases in Swahili, Mandarin, or Portuguese, not just for business, but for connection. At the next company town hall, Olivia shared a video montage. Employees from every corner of the building practicing new languages, sharing personal stories, and bridging divides. Charles, once a vocal skeptic, approached Victor afterward. Look, he said, hesitating. I wasn't sure at first, but you've shown me what real leadership looks like. Victor smiled, nodding. It's about giving every voice a chance to be heard. The company's culture shifted from silence to dialogue, from walls to bridges, and at the heart of it all was a janitor who spoke 13 languages and led a revolution in how a company saw itself. Because sometimes, the biggest changes come from the quietest corners. Victor stood by the window of his new office, the city's skyline glowing in the fading light. From janitor to senior director, not just a title, but a symbol of what's possible when talent meets opportunity and when people are seen for who they truly are. His journey wasn't about breaking glass ceilings alone. It was about shattering the invisible barriers that keep voices silent and potential hidden. As the building buzzed with new energy, Victor knew this was only the beginning. Change wasn't a moment. It was a movement. And in every hallway, every office, every corner once overlooked, a new story was waiting to be told. Because true leadership listens. True leadership empowers. And sometimes true leadership starts with a janitor who spoke 13 languages and changed everything. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or invisible, remember Victor's story. Your time is coming. Keep pushing, keep speaking, keep rising. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to smash that thumbs up and hit subscribe for more unforgettable, emotional, and viral true stories. We want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, where in the world are you watching from?